My name is Jake Thompson, and I've lived in Wichita, Kansas, for most of my life. The Walmart I went to that night was on East Kellogg Drive, the big 24-hour supercenter that always seemed to be busy no matter the time. I never liked shopping at night, but that evening left me with no choice. My fridge was practically empty, and the thought of starting the next day without coffee or breakfast was unbearable. So after a long shift at work, I dragged myself to the Walmart on the edge of town. The parking lot was nearly deserted, save for a few scattered cars and a lone streetlight buzzing faintly in the cold night air. It was already past 11 p.m., and the store's familiar fluorescent glow felt oddly unwelcoming. Pushing a shopping cart through the automatic doors, I grabbed a list from my pocket and tried to focus. Milk, bread, eggs, coffee, the usual. The store was mostly quiet, save for the occasional squeak of a cart or the muffled voices of employees restocking shelves. It felt like I had the place to myself, and for a while that was comforting. But then I noticed him. I was in the cereal aisle, debating between a box of Frosted Flakes and something healthier, when I saw him out of the corner of my eye. A man stood at the far end of the aisle, his back partially turned, pretending to look at a shelf of oatmeal. He wore a dark hoodie and jeans, the hood pulled up just enough to obscure most of his face. At first, I didn't think much of it. People shop late for all kinds of reasons. Maybe he was like me, grabbing essentials after a long day. I tossed the Frosted Flakes into my cart and moved on. In the dairy section, I opened the cooler to grab a gallon of milk. And when I turned around, there he was again. He stood a few feet away, this time looking at a row of yogurts. He wasn't holding a cart or a basket, which struck me as odd. Most people don't just wander through Walmart empty-handed. I tried to shake it off. Coincidences happen, right? Still, the back of my neck prickled as I pushed my cart toward the bread aisle. The fluorescent lights above seemed harsher now, casting strange, stark shadows on the linoleum floor. I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. Sure enough, the man was there, keeping his distance but moving in the same direction as me. He wasn't even pretending to browse this time. He just stood at the end of the aisle, watching. My heart started to race. I tried to focus on the shelves in front of me, grabbing a loaf of wheat bread and shoving it into my cart. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just another tired shopper whose path happened to cross mine a few times. But something about the way he stood there, motionless and silent, sent a shiver down my spine. I decided to test my theory. Leaving the bread aisle, I turned sharply into the snack section, then cut across to the cleaning supplies. I made a few quick turns, zigzagging through the store, deliberately heading into random areas. When I finally stopped near the pet food aisle, I glanced back. He was there, leaning casually against a shelf, his hood still up. He wasn't even pretending anymore. He wasn't shopping. He was following me. A wave of panic surged through me. I clutched the handle of my cart, my mind racing. What did he want? Should I confront him? Call someone? I glanced around, but the store was eerily empty. The only other people I'd seen were employees stocking shelves, and they were scattered across different sections. I told myself to stay calm. For all I knew, he could be harmless. Maybe he was lost, or waiting for someone. Still, I decided it was time to cut my trip short. I'd gotten most of what I needed anyway. Heading toward the front of the store, I pushed my cart faster than usual, my eyes darting around to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But every time I glanced back, he was there, keeping a steady distance. It was like a game of cat and mouse, and I was definitely the mouse. When I reached the self-checkout area, I hoped he'd stay back, that he'd lose interest or get distracted. I scanned my items as quickly as I could, fumbling with the bags and trying not to look behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Once I was done, I grabbed my receipt and headed for the exit, pushing the cart toward the glass doors. For a brief moment, I let myself believe it was over. Maybe he'd leave me alone now that I was leaving the store. But as I approached the sliding doors, I saw him. He was standing near the exit, leaning casually against the wall, as if waiting for someone. His hood was still up, his hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't move or look at me directly, but I knew he was there for me. The chill that ran through me this time was different. It wasn't just fear. It was the realization that I might not be able to just walk away from this. I froze for a moment, gripping the cart tighter as I assessed my options. The automatic doors slid open, letting in a gust of cold night air. The parking lot outside seemed even darker now, the buzzing streetlights casting weak pools of light over the mostly empty asphalt. My car was parked toward the far end, a good 100 feet from the exit. Between me and safety was open space, and him. Taking a deep breath, I decided the best course of action was to act natural. Panic wouldn't help me now, and the last thing I wanted was to give him any reason to think I was afraid. I pushed my cart forward, my pace brisk but steady, avoiding direct eye contact with the man by the wall. My peripheral vision caught him shifting slightly as I passed, his body angling as if to follow. The sound of the cart's rattling wheels felt deafening in the stillness of the night. My thoughts were racing. Should I call someone? Would anyone even get here in time if something happened? I pulled my phone from my pocket, pretending to check it as I walked. No new messages, no missed calls. The sight of the empty screen made my stomach sink. As I neared my car, I chanced a quick glance behind me. He was following, his pace matching mine, hands still buried in his pockets. My heart thudded harder, and I fumbled with my keys, trying to get them ready without dropping them. Reaching my car, I yanked open the trunk and began loading my bags as quickly as possible, my hands trembling slightly. "Hey!" a voice called out, startling me so badly I almost dropped a bag of groceries. I turned to see him standing a few feet away, closer than I'd realized. His face was partially shadowed under the hood, but I could make out enough to see he wasn't smiling. His expression was blank, unreadable, and that made it worse. "You got a minute?" he asked, his voice low but steady. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to get in the car and drive. Yeah?" I replied cautiously, trying to keep my tone neutral. My hands hovered near the trunk, ready to slam it shut if needed. "My car broke down," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the edge of the parking lot. I glanced in the direction he pointed but didn't see any vehicle. "I was hoping you could give me a lift. Just a few miles, I swear." My mouth went dry. The entire situation felt wrong. His vague story, his sudden appearance, the way he'd been watching me in the store, none of it added up. "Sorry, I'm not going that way," I lied, taking a small step back. His eyes narrowed slightly, his posture shifting. "Come on, man. It's late, and I'm stuck out here. I just need a ride to the gas station." "I really can't," I said firmly, closing the trunk with more force than I intended. I moved toward the driver's side door, my keys in hand. He stepped closer, just enough to make me freeze. "You sure?" he said, his tone sharper now. "Doesn't seem like a big deal. 5 minutes of your time, that's all I'm asking." My heart was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Look, I'm sorry," I said, unlocking the car and pulling the door open. "Maybe someone else can help you." For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me. The tension was suffocating. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, heading toward the darker part of the lot. I watched him go, my hands shaking as I climbed into the car and locked the doors. I sat there for a few seconds, catching my breath and trying to process what had just happened. My gut told me I'd made the right decision, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see him standing behind the car, but the lot appeared empty. Starting the engine, I backed out of the parking space and headed for the exit. My eyes flicked to the mirrors repeatedly as I drove, scanning for any sign of him. The streetlights stretched long shadows across the road, and every dark corner felt like a potential hiding spot. As I pulled onto the highway, I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. I'd gotten away. At least that's what I told myself. But then I noticed the headlights. The headlights were faint at first, barely noticeable in my rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought I might be imagining things, that the fear from earlier was playing tricks on me. But as I merged onto the highway, the lights grew brighter, their glow steady and unrelenting. I told myself it was just another driver, someone heading home late like me. But as the car behind me maintained its distance, neither gaining nor falling back, unease settled over me again. I checked the clock on the dashboard, 11:43 p.m. The highway stretched ahead in near darkness, with only the occasional street lamp punctuating the gloom. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I switched lanes, hoping the car would pass me, but it mirrored my movement. My heartbeat quickened, the weight of the situation pressing down harder with every second. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. The car's headlights were close enough now that I could make out its shape, a dark sedan, nondescript, but undeniably deliberate in its pursuit. Trying to stay calm, I rationalized. Maybe they're just heading in the same direction. Maybe this is all just coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. This was no accident. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. My turnoff was a few miles ahead, a smaller road that would eventually lead to my neighborhood. If they were still following me by then, I'd know for sure. The miles crawled by, every moment stretched thin with tension. The sedan stayed behind me, never too close, but always there. I checked my phone, considering calling someone, but the idea of trying to explain my paranoia felt almost as daunting as the situation itself. What if I was overreacting? What if it really was nothing? As I approached the turnoff, my decision was made for me. The sedan stayed on my tail, its headlights unwavering. Panic surged through me, and I made a split-second choice. Instead of turning onto the road that led to my house, I stayed on the highway, heading toward the next exit. If they were following me, I wasn't about to lead them straight to where I lived. Sure enough, the sedan stayed with me, maintaining its distance but never losing sight of me. My pulse was pounding in my ears now, the realization hitting me like a freight train. Whoever was in that car wasn't just another driver. They were following me. My mind raced through my options. Should I pull over? Speed up? Try to lose them? None of it seemed safe. I didn't know who was behind the wheel or what they wanted, but I wasn't about to take any chances. Up ahead, a green sign announced the next exit. It was for a larger town, one with plenty of gas stations and late-night diners. People. Safety. Without hesitation, I signaled and took the exit, my tires screeching slightly as I rounded the curve. The sedan followed, its headlights unwavering. The road led to a strip of fast food restaurants and convenience stores, their neon signs glowing brightly against the night sky. I spotted a well-lit gas station up ahead and pulled in, my hands shaking as I parked near the entrance. The sedan slowed as it approached, then passed by without stopping, its taillights fading into the distance. I sat there for a moment, my heart hammering in my chest. Had they given up? Or were they just circling back, waiting for another opportunity? The thought made my skin crawl. I needed to be somewhere with people, somewhere I wouldn't be alone. Grabbing my phone, I called a friend who lived nearby. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can I come over?" "I'll explain when I get there." Thankfully, they agreed without asking too many questions. I started the car and pulled out of the gas station, my eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. The streets were mostly empty, but every pair of headlights I saw made my stomach twist. When I finally arrived at my friend's house, I parked in their driveway and hurried to the door. They opened it before I even knocked, concern etched on their face. "What happened?" they asked. I hesitated, glancing back at my car before stepping inside. "I think someone was following me," I said, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. "From Walmart. I don't know who they were or why, but it didn't feel right." My friend listened patiently as I recounted the events, their expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "You should call the police," they said firmly. "At least file a report, just in case." I nodded, though the idea of reliving the night's events again made me feel sick. Still, they were right. If this wasn't over, if whoever it was decided to come back, I needed to be prepared. That night, as I lay awake on my friend's couch, I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the store, the way he'd watched me, the way he'd followed me, and the sedan. Who were they? What did they want? I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that I wasn't going back to that Walmart anytime soon. The next morning, I woke up on my friend's couch with a stiff neck and a lingering sense of unease. Sunlight streamed through the windows, but it did little to shake the tension that had settled over me. My friend was in the kitchen, brewing coffee and scrolling through their phone. They looked up when I shuffled in. "Did you sleep at all?" they asked, concern etched on their face. "A little," I lied, grabbing a mug and pouring myself some coffee. The truth was, every creak of the house and distant sound of a car passing by had kept me on edge. I couldn't stop replaying the events of the previous night, trying to make sense of them. My friend set their phone down and leaned against the counter. "I've been thinking," they said. "Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Like maybe the guy in the store wasn't connected to the car that followed you. Could just be two weird coincidences." "Maybe," I replied, though I didn't believe it. The way the man had watched me, the deliberate way the sedan had matched my every move, it was too much to write off as chance. "Did you call the police yet?" they asked, raising an eyebrow. I shook my head. "What am I supposed to tell them?" "Hi, I think someone followed me, but I don't have any proof, and I'm not sure who it was." The words sounded ridiculous even to me. "Still, you should file a report," they insisted. "Even if nothing comes of it, at least it'll be on record. And if anything else happens..." They trailed off, their expression darkening. Reluctantly, I nodded. After breakfast, I borrowed their laptop and searched for the non-emergency number for the local police department. The officer who answered was polite, but non-committal. I gave them as much detail as I could. The man in the store, the car that had followed me, the general unease that had refused to leave me since. They promised to keep an eye out for anything suspicious and took my contact information in case they needed to follow up. It wasn't exactly reassuring, but at least I'd done something. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I stayed at my friend's house, unwilling to return home just yet. By evening, I'd convinced myself that maybe my friend was right, that the events of the previous night had been a strange but harmless coincidence. But as night fell, the unease crept back in. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. I picked it up, expecting a text or email, but what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a message from an unknown number. The text was short and simple. "You shouldn't have left." My stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, rereading the message over and over. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no context, no name, but I knew exactly what it meant. "What is it?" my friend asked, noticing the look on my face. I handed them the phone without saying a word. Their eyes widened as they read the message. "Who the hell sent this?" they demanded. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I think it's him." "The guy from the store?" I nodded, my mind racing. How had he gotten my number? Had he followed me longer than I realized? Had he somehow found out who I was? The questions piled up, each one more terrifying than the last. "We need to call the police again," my friend said firmly, already reaching for their phone. "And tell them what?" I snapped, panic creeping into my voice. "That I got a creepy text? That I think it's from someone I don't even have a name for?" "Yes," they said, their tone steady. "This isn't normal. You need to take this seriously." Reluctantly, I agreed. The officer who took my second call seemed more concerned this time, especially after I mentioned the text. They promised to send a patrol car to my friend's neighborhood and advised me to avoid going anywhere alone. Their reassurances felt hollow, but at least it was something. That night, sleep was out of the question. Every sound outside made my heart race. I kept checking my phone, half expecting another message to appear. But the screen stayed dark, offering no answers, only silence. By the time morning came, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't stay here, waiting for whatever was coming next. I needed to figure out who this person was and why they were targeting me. Because one thing was clear: this wasn't over. The decision to take action gave me a sliver of control, but it also meant venturing into territory I wasn't prepared for. I spent the morning retracing every detail of the last few days, trying to figure out how the mysterious man could have found me or gotten my number. My phone sat next to me on the table, its silence now as unnerving as the single message it had delivered the night before. "What's the plan?" my friend asked, breaking the quiet. They had been patient with me, but I could tell the situation was starting to wear on them too. "I'm going back to Walmart," I said, surprising even myself with the declaration. "What? Why?" Their voice was a mix of disbelief and concern. "Isn't that the last place you should go?" "If he's watching me, he's already found a way to track me," I reasoned, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Maybe I can find something there that helps me figure out who he is. A security camera, a receipt, anything." "And what if he's there?" That question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. I didn't have an answer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that going back was my only chance to get ahead of this. By mid-afternoon, I was parked in the same Walmart lot where this had all started. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and the place was busier than it had been the night before. The normalcy of the scene felt almost jarring, a stark contrast to the tension coiled in my chest. Stepping out of the car, I scanned the parking lot, half expecting to see the man in the hoodie leaning against a car or lurking near the entrance. But there was nothing unusual, just families unloading carts and shoppers coming and going. I grabbed my phone and headed inside, my heart pounding with each step. The store was as chaotic as ever, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the chatter of customers and the occasional announcement over the intercom. I forced myself to focus, retracing my steps from the previous night. The cereal aisle, the dairy section, the bread aisle, each one felt like a snapshot from a dream I couldn't quite piece together. I paused at the end of each aisle, glancing around, searching for any sign of him. Nothing. As I moved toward the electronics section, I noticed a security camera mounted near the ceiling, its lens aimed down at the aisles. A wave of hope surged through me. If the store's cameras had caught him following me, maybe there would be a record, something tangible to take to the police. I approached the customer service desk, my nerves fraying with every step. The woman behind the counter looked up as I reached her, her friendly smile fading slightly when she saw my expression. "Hi," I began, trying to steady my voice. "I was here last night and something happened. I think someone was following me. Is there any way to check the security footage?" Her brow furrowed, and she glanced around as if unsure how to respond. "We don't usually let customers access the footage," she said carefully. "But if you think something serious happened, I can get a manager for you." "Please," I said, the desperation creeping into my voice. "It's important." She nodded and picked up the phone, making a quick call. A few minutes later, a man in a navy polo with a name tag reading Tom approached. His expression was wary but polite. "I'm the store manager," he said, extending a hand. "I hear you had an issue last night?" I explained everything, from the man in the hoodie to the text I'd received. Tom listened intently, his face growing more serious as I went on. "All right," he said when I finished. "Let me see what we can do. Follow me." He led me to a small office near the back of the store, cluttered with papers and a desk covered in monitors. One screen showed a live feed of the store's aisles, while others displayed different camera angles from the previous day. "We'll start with the time you said you were here," Tom said, pulling up the footage. As the video played, the familiar scenes of my shopping trip unfolded. There I was, standing in the cereal aisle, then the dairy section. And there he was, the man in the hoodie, lingering just a few steps behind me. Seeing it on screen made my skin crawl all over again. "That's him," I said, pointing to the screen. "Can you tell where he went after that?" Tom nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he switched to another angle. The footage showed the man leaving the store shortly after me, heading straight for the parking lot. My car was visible in the background, and my stomach churned as I saw him pause, watching as I loaded my groceries. "Did he get into a car?" I asked, leaning closer. Tom rewound the footage and tracked the man as he walked through the lot. But instead of getting into a vehicle, he disappeared into the shadows near the edge of the property, out of the camera's range. "That's odd," Tom muttered, frowning at the screen. "If he didn't have a car, how did he follow you?" My blood ran cold. The text message flashed in my mind, its words taking on a new, sinister weight. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I think he's still out there." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He could still be watching. The footage had answered some questions, but left me with more, unsettling ones. If he hadn't left in a car, then he must have been on foot. And if he was on foot, it meant he had been close enough to follow me after I left the store. But how far? To my house? My friend's house? The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. Tom's face mirrored my unease. "I'll send this footage to the police. They'll want to take a look at it." "Thanks," I managed, though my voice felt distant. "I appreciate it." As I left Walmart, the late afternoon sun felt oppressive rather than comforting. Every shadow in the parking lot felt like it was watching me. I climbed into my car, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel and forcing myself to breathe. Back at my friend's house, I shared what I'd learned. They listened intently, their expression shifting between worry and anger. "You shouldn't be dealing with this alone," they said firmly. "Stay here until we figure out what's going on, and let the police do their job." I nodded. But deep down, I wasn't sure if waiting was the right move. Every part of me itched to take action, to find out who this person was and why they were targeting me. That night, as we double-checked the locks and drew the curtains, I made a decision. If this wasn't resolved soon, I'd take matters into my own hands. The next day, the police called. An officer named Ramirez asked me to come down to the station. They'd reviewed the footage and wanted to discuss it in person. My stomach churned as I made the drive. Every scenario, from mundane to horrifying, playing out in my mind. At the station, Ramirez greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a small conference room. On the table was a series of printouts, stills from the Walmart security footage. "We've identified the man in the hoodie," Ramirez said, tapping one of the images. "His name is Caleb Jordan. He has a record, mostly petty theft and trespassing. No history of violence, but..." He hesitated, his brow furrowing. "He's been flagged in a few missing persons cases. Nothing concrete, but his name keeps popping up." "Missing persons," I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Ramirez nodded grimly. "He's known for latching on to people, following them, making them uncomfortable. Usually he disappears before anything escalates, but we're taking this seriously." "What should I do?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Be cautious. Stay with your friend for now, and if you see him again, call us immediately. We've put out an alert to locate him, but until we do, don't engage with him." I left the station feeling a mix of relief and dread. At least now I had a name, a face, and some assurance that the police were involved. But the knowledge that Caleb was still out there, watching and waiting, kept my nerves on edge. Over the next week, I followed the officer's advice. I stayed at my friend's house, avoided going out alone, and kept my phone within reach at all times. Each day that passed without incident felt like a small victory, but the tension never fully lifted. I jumped at every noise, every shadow, every unfamiliar car. Then, one evening, as I was finally beginning to feel a semblance of normalcy, my phone buzzed. It was another text from the unknown number. "You can't hide forever." My stomach dropped, and my hands shook as I showed the message to my friend. They called the police immediately, and Ramirez arrived within the hour. He reassured me that they were closing in on Caleb, but the fear was back in full force, gnawing at my sanity. 2 days later, the call came. Caleb had been apprehended near a bus station on the outskirts of town. When the police searched his belongings, they found a notebook filled with names, dates, and locations. My name was there, along with detailed notes about my movements and habits. It was chilling proof that I'd been his target for longer than I'd realized. Ramirez assured me that Caleb wouldn't be bothering me again, but the damage was done. The experience had left its mark, and it would take time to feel safe again. Even now, weeks later, I find myself looking over my shoulder, double-checking locks, and avoiding places that feel too empty. I don't know why Caleb chose me, and maybe I never will. But one thing is certain. I'll never look at a late-night trip to Walmart the same way again. If you like this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell to listen to new stories from Mr. Fear every day. Also, let us know in the comments if you've ever had a spooky experience while shopping at Walmart. Thank you for watching.